Okay, welcome back to the Barrett channel today for a brand new video. We've got a slightly different one today. Doing a sort of long haul interview, not really interview, but more of a casual chat, I guess. I've wanted to do these for a while. I kind of like this long form conversation. I feel like it's much more authentic, and you know, you get to dig deeper into people a little bit and plug their mind about things. So today, I've got one of my good friends from back home, Ben Coley. I've known him, you know, since I was a kid. We've went to all the same schools together. He currently lives in the UK, back in sort of my hometown area. And yeah, let's get this rocking and rolling. Introduce yourself, Big Ben.
There you go. I'm Ben. Yeah. So I'm a radio presenter at the minute. I present for BFBS, the Forces Station. So we're a media organisation, and I present on the radio station for the Armed Forces, for the UK Armed Forces, and I'll be travelling around the world doing that. So yeah, and mate, you're absolutely smashing it with this channel, and it's so cool to be on, like, you know, part of this as well. I've been really looking forward to joining you because you guys have just been putting out some awesome stuff. So thanks for having me.
Nah, you know, absolutely. I'm looking forward to it as well. So it's a pleasure to have you on, mate. And I just want to plug you a little bit about the BFBS thing, because Ben has been a radio presenter for a while now. You studied that at university, didn't you?
Yeah, so I did multimedia journalism. So that's journalism across all different sorts of mediums, right. Radio, TV, magazine, newspapers. But I did student radio, which was kind of like a big part of my uni experience, I guess. So I then kind of finished uni and went into just freelancing for a while, and then eventually, yeah, getting this job as a radio presenter. So,
mate, it's really cool, and I literally love telling people, oh, one of my best mates is a radio presenter for the British Forces. Like, I love it, because how long have you been doing that now? Before this pandemic started, anyway, when things all sort of changed.
Well, that's the thing with this whole pandemic thing. It's kind of, I mean, it's messed up everyone's plans. Don't get me wrong. It's not just myself, but
yeah.
So I was there presenting. So I started on the 5th or 6th of Jan, I think. And when was lockdown in the UK? It was towards the end of. It was kind of like mid-March, towards the end of March, I think, off the top of my head. So I was only there for sort of 2.5, 3 months before coming back home, and that's where I've been locked down since. So, and at home, I haven't really been presenting, which has been the thing. So I've just kind of been helping out with bits and pieces here and there. So I'm really missing presenting.
Yeah, I bet.
Which, yeah, you kind of, like, if anyone out there is a presenter, you'll know that you have like a bug for it, and you just like, you're itching to get presenting again. But I do a podcast in my spare time, so that's like an outlet for me.
Kind of filling in for it a little bit.
Yeah, it's the next best thing. So, you know.
Yeah. So when you were, you know, at work, what do you do for the British Forces? Because you're a radio presenter, but what does that mean? What are you doing at your BFBS job?
It's really funny. Whenever I like tell people about it, people expect me to be like talking about the military all the time, or that I'm using like, what is it, the phonetic alphabet, where it's like Alpha Bravo, like chatting like that. But it's it's really not like that. Like, just like any job, people want to listen to a different medium, be it radio, or they want to listen to podcasts, or they want to watch TV to escape, or just to take their mind off things. So, you know, we have a constant, we've got our own, BFBS has its own news service, its own sort of 24-hour news platform, which is fantastic that they provide that service. And that's mostly military-related news. And I do speak about military-related things, so I'll have interviews with, you know, it might be a flight lieutenant or a general, or such, you know, I'll be chatting to people in the military and doing military-related interviews. But on the whole, it's entertainment, it's music presenting, because at the end of the day, that's what people like to hear. They don't always, just because they're in the military doesn't mean that they want to be listening to military-related topics all the time. So, so it's kind of like a nice mix. That's why I really like it. So,
Yeah, and this is your first year. You have only been in the job in the office for like 2 months, and you were telling me before how they were supposed to be shooting you off to X, Y, and Z countries, right? And that kind of plan all got a bit messed up with the whole pandemic thing. So where were they supposed to send you first of all? And
I'm meant to be in Gibraltar right now.
Gibraltar, which is in Spain, on the south coast of Spain, right?
Yeah. So I was meant to be there now, but that hasn't happened. I was only meant to be there for a couple of months, and then I was going to be going to Cyprus, and that's still the plan. I'll still be going to Cyprus kind of... I haven't got a date yet, but it's going to be sort of mid-July, August time that I'll be off there. So it's kind of just Gibraltar that I haven't been to, but I was really looking forward to going because I don't know much about Gibraltar, really. I know that,
right.
It's kind of a peninsula off Spain, and that it's kind of its own... It's self-governed, if you know what I mean. It's its own country, effectively, even though it's attached to Spain. And I know that it's got a lot of British heritage there. Like, apparently, and this is just what I've heard, it's got loads of British shops. Like, you'll go there and you'll pop into Morrison's or Boots or whatever.
Yeah, I went there when I was about 10 years old.
Oh, yeah, what was it like?
I can't really remember. I'm pretty sure I'm getting some light bulb moments when you're talking about this. It was kind of just similar to being in England, to be honest. And you can go up to the Gibraltar Rock and see across to North Africa from the rock, which is
so
quite cool. But carry on what you were saying anyway.
Well, yeah. So as in literally, that's just where I was meant to be, and then it was going to be Cyprus. So I'm still heading out to Cyprus, which I'm really looking forward to. So we're going out to RAF Akrotiri, which would be really cool.
That's going to be quite the experience. But
it really will.
Yeah, for many, around the world, this pandemic has thrown a spanner in the works, quite literally. And, you and I were talking before that we're in very fortunate positions in terms of the pandemic, because you've been set up at home, and which we'll go into in a second. And for me, obviously the viewers watching know that me and my dad work on this channel together, and the pandemic basically just freed up all of our time. So we were basically, maybe between us, working 80 to 100 hours on the channel, on content, on whatever it is behind the scenes to grow the channel. And that's really when we sort of started seeing things pick up. So for us, it was a little bit of a silver lining, and I can't quite relate, and I do want to speak to some more people who have gone through way more tough times during this pandemic, because people are being put out of jobs, businesses are being lost, left, right and centre. I lived in a very small town in England, the one you live close to, and I bet that's not going to look so good after this pandemic, because it wasn't looking good beforehand. So
no, man, the disruption it's caused for... I'm not even considering me or you in this conversation. Like, we're so fortunate that we're in positions where, it hasn't... It's affected everyone to an extent, but it hasn't massively affected us. Like, like you said, people have lost jobs. Livelihoods as they know it have been lost. People have lost loved ones,
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
And it's just crazy that we're living in this time. Like, I remember when I saw a news story, I think this must have been late Feb, early March, and it was that a British man, I think, was on a boat back from Japan or something. I think he was on a Japanese boat, and he was like the first person to get coronavirus. It was like, a British man's got it. They've locked down the ship. It's, And I remember thinking, there's going to be the odd few people that get it, and this guy's probably going to be one of few that get it. Still awful, obviously, but I was thinking, it's not really going to make much of a dent. And that's me being massively naive,
Yeah.
And then it was, a few people in the UK have got it. And then before you know it, it's almost just like I found myself on the TV watching Boris Johnson talk about the UK going into lockdown. And when I was watching it, it was almost like it was almost like an out-of-body experience. I was watching it like,
right.
What is going on?
What is going on?
The Prime Minister addressing you saying, we're locking down the country. I was like,
it doesn't make any sense, does it?
Yeah.
I know. You know what? This is... Sorry to carry on first.
Oh, no, I was going to say, even then, I thought, oh, well, the lockdown's only going to be 3-4 weeks. And here I am. And it's like, with
months
13
later.
weeks down the line now, you know, we're months down the line. It's like, it's crazy.
Yeah, it's just jogged my memory, actually. You were the first person who alerted me of anything, of this new novel virus that was starting to happen. I remember because I just hopped off the flight back from Malaysia. I took a little trip there with my girlfriend. January 16th. I came back on January 20th. I got off the plane and looked at my phone, and I got a message from you saying, "Oh, mate, I've seen there's this virus sort of thing in China. Have you heard anything about it?" I was like, "No, I don't know what you're on about. I'm sure it would be big news over here, and I'm sure I'd know about it." Anyway, I got onto the metro, and like there were a few more people wearing masks than I've seen before, and then the next day is when I sort of started hearing it left, right, and centre, and it must have been within 3 days there was not a single person that I saw in a day without a face mask on. And that's when we started thinking, this is real, like something's going on here. And obviously because it's in the name, it was a novel virus at the time. That was a kind of panicky time because no one knew anything about it.
It's weird as well because in the UK, as you know, no one under normal circumstances really wears masks at all. It's not a thing. Right. And I remember the first time I went to Tesco's in lockdown, and it was like something out of a sci-fi movie. Like there's tape out on the floor making sure people stay 2 meters apart, and I was seeing people there with gloves and masks on, and it was such a weird sight to see. But then now everyone's wearing face masks. Like I'll go to Tesco's and there's quite a few people wearing them. Not everyone, but it's just a normal sight now. Like I won't think twice about it. I'll walk past someone, I'll be like, oh, they've got a mask on, and I wouldn't really notice. It's crazy how over time it's become I hate using this phrase, but it has
become the norm.
Pandemic has become the new normal, which you know, it's mad that it's got to that stage, I suppose.
Let's dig into that a little bit deeper about the face masks, because this is really interesting from a psychological point of view. Like being here and seeing that everyone's wearing face masks and knowing for a fact that they make a difference, and you know all the governments have said now that they have confirmed that it makes a difference. And you know we just went to a mask factory and you know the sort of white ones, they're called N95 masks. They seal your whole face off. They do rigorous testing on that and pass air through it, and it shows that it stops 99.4% of the particles coming in. So quite evidently, that's going to do some, you know, that's going to help a lot in terms of, you know, slowing the spread. Back to my point, you know, everyone's wearing them here. However, you know, in the Western world, that's not a part of our culture at all, even when you're sick. And I couldn't get into my head why people were not taking it seriously back home and buying up face masks and wearing them. But at the same time, I know if I wasn't here, I would just be exactly the same as everyone back home. And that was annoying me. I was like, I'd like to think that I would be telling everyone if I was in England to wear masks, but I know that wouldn't be the case. I'd be the same as everyone else. Why do you think that people in England and people in the Western world just don't like this mask wearing thing? What do you think?
I don't know what it is, but you're so right when you say that there's almost a stigma with wearing a mask. It's almost like, oh, you're being overcautious, or you're kind
playing
of overreacting.
into it.
Because a couple of weeks ago, my dad bought back 4 face masks from work. So he works in construction, and he went and visited a site, and they had like a sort of, they were giving out a load of masks. So my dad picked up 4 and bought them back for our family. So I put it in my car, and I thought, okay, well, I live in a small village, so I'm not going to wear a mask around a small village because, you know, it's open anyway. It's not busy or crowded. But I had it in my car because I thought if I get out at the, you know, if I stop off at a petrol station or something like that and it's quite busy, then it would make sense to wear it. And sure enough, I wore it. I've only worn it once at a busy petrol station, and I put it on, and I felt when I went into this store, I could see that people were looking at me, and people would like double take and be like, "Oh, he's got a mask on," and like, you know, they wouldn't say anything or they wouldn't stare at me for long, but people look at you like, "Oh, he's wearing a mask," sort of thing. Like you can almost see people are slightly startled by it or whatever. Yeah, you can feel it a little bit. Now, maybe that's more. I've built that up in my head more. I don't know, but there is definitely people turn their heads over here, whereas I'm sure over there in China it's maybe not the case so much. Like people, it's almost part of what people wear day in day out, so people wouldn't really notice. Right,
it's actually quite the stark contrast to that. It's, you know, it's a little bit different now. It's a little bit different now, and it has been for the past sort of 3 or 4 weeks because they've really, you know, sort of got it under control, and the weather is super hot and humid. So wearing it is painful sometimes when you're outside. But you know, previous to 3 or 4 weeks ago, it was like if you weren't wearing one, you would feel it. You know, especially I would say especially being a foreigner here. But anyone in China, if you weren't wearing one, you would be, you know, you would feel that. Why is he not protecting himself and everyone else around him? And the reason I say especially foreigners,
but that's the right attitude, don't you think? Like that's the perfect way to be. I think anyway.
It absolutely is. I think too. And the reason I said foreigners specifically was because you might know I think I told you before they stopped all foreign entry, right? I don't know when that happened, at like the end of March or something like that. Maybe someone can let us know the date down in the comments. But there was a time where they really started getting it under control in China, and you know, all the ones that were spreading it again within the local population was foreigners. So that's when they cut off foreigners from entering back. But for that like month period, it got into the social media circles that it was foreigners bringing the virus back. So it was very again, like you said, maybe I was getting it in my own head, but there was definitely a thing where, you know, I would step onto the metro, people would move away from me. You know, I'd walk down the street and more people would be looking at me and frowning. You know, and if I was caught not wearing a mask during that time, it was, you know, it was really not good. So that was happening for maybe 3 or 4 weeks, but I'd say that's totally died off now. I don't feel that at all. And, you know, there's probably half and half people wearing masks all the time. I will now wear it if I'm in a crowded place, but not if I'm outside.
And what do you think the reason is as to why in China it seems to be more socially unacceptable to not wear a mask as opposed to a Western country like the UK? Why do you reckon that is? Do you reckon it's just a general societal attitude that's just, you know, popped up over time, or do you reckon there's something specific behind it?
I think the two biggest reasons I can think of, one being Chinese people are extremely concerned about their health, just all round. And I think that has probably stemmed from the fact that they have to pay for their healthcare. You know, they've got X, Y, and Z things like insurance through work and stuff like that to help afford it. But they do have to pay for their healthcare, and we also have to pay for it in the West. But, you know, we've got the NHS in England. Sure. But everyone's concerned about their health more so than back home. And I think as soon as anything is wrong with their health, even if they get the sniffles, you know, people get seriously concerned, because I think their mind goes straight to, this is going to cost me money. I might be wrong, and there might be other things, but you know, I'd be interested to hear, because there's a lot of people Chinese who watch these videos. I'd be interested to hear why you think that the average Chinese person cares much more about their health than in the West. But the second reason I was going to mention was because I think people look at it much more as we are one, we are going to help each other to get through this, rather than having like an individualist mindset. It's more like we're going to get through this together as a country, and this is how we're all going to club together to overcome this, rather than people back home thinking about their individualist freedoms being taken away, and F the government, I'm not going to do what they say, sort of thing.
There's definitely been that attitude, and it is obviously in the minority. Like, majority of people in the UK have treated it seriously, and have hopefully, I'd like to think, like thought of others and things like that. But it's been in the news recently over here. There's been like illegal raves. It was up in Manchester,
really?
Rave of like 4,000 people, 5,000 people, and it's just like, wow. I don't understand it. And at this rave, there was 3 stabbings, I think, a rape, and there's something else that happened. I'm not too sure, but the point being that is going on during all of this, like illegal raves. I can't help but feel like, how can you look at what's going on and think that that's an okay thing to do? I don't understand that. And like you were saying, that's just this kind of individualist attitude of like, oh well, what's gonna benefit me going for a rave? Like, whereas obviously in China, it's much more of this kind of group, like, no, we're in this together sort of thing. And I don't know why that's the case. I'm not sure. I don't know why there's that difference. Like you said, the fact that we've got the NHS over here, maybe there's a deal of complacency, like, oh well, I don't really have to.
I think so. I think that's slightly
pay too much for healthcare, and the government have it covered. We're sorted. So maybe we feel like we've got that to fall back on. I don't know. Because I suppose I'm not too sure about how much healthcare is out in China, but is it quite an expensive commodity?
It's actually not. It's really affordable. We get a lot of comments. We get a lot of comments about when we do mention healthcare stuff, comparing to the USA. It's an incredibly, that's not the right word, but it's way cheaper. And
sure.
Just to give you an example, my dad went for a full body check, MRI, scans, X-rays, the lot. He was in there for half a day, and it cost him just over equivalent to about £100.
Oh, right. So that's really good then, isn't it?
Yeah. Carry on your point if you still remember it.
Mate, I was rambling, to be honest, but just essentially, I'm not sure why the reasons are, and I'm sure your viewers might be able to shed some more light on this, but I don't know why there is this kind of inherent difference in attitude towards health between Western countries and clearly that of China and other Asian countries as well. I don't know why that is, but like you said, I'm sure it's the provision of healthcare and how much it costs people may have something to do with that, because I can't help but I'm complacent about the NHS and stuff. Like, I've got that to fall back on. It's all I've ever known. I've lived and I've been born and raised in the UK, so I always think, if I break my arm, go to A&E and it's sorted on the NHS.
Exactly.
And things like that. Like, you're naturally complacent about it if it's just there to fall back on.
Yeah, and I just want to clear a misconception. There's a lot of people here in China who I talk to that think that we get free healthcare, and that's definitely not the case. We do pay a considerable chunk out of our wages when you're back in the UK to pay towards, the NHS. So we do pay for it, just not per time that we go. And this point's interesting as well, because this ties into the money thing, right? Over here, when everyone got locked down, I don't speak perfect Mandarin, so I haven't got a massive sample size to draw from. But from what I see, experience, and hear, people have a couple of months, a few months' wages to fall back on for a rainy day, because they've very much a saving society that's drilled into their minds to save money for a rainy day, for exactly this kind of thing. and it's very much more conservative about spending money. And that is changing with the younger population, but it's definitely still a massive part of society. That is not the case over there, is it?
No. It's more
spend. It's more spend money that you don't have, you know.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I'm already thinking of like a couple of mates. I won't air them out on your channel, but I'm already thinking of a couple of mates that, you know, they'll get their paycheck and they'll just be like, oh, I'll buy this and buy this, and yeah, it's definitely there's definitely a difference for sure.
So
and obviously, like anything,
Sorry,
I was just going to say, like anything, you get people that are good at saving money, but in general, yeah, it is more of a spend culture. You know, you get your money, you spend it, and you're spending money you don't necessarily have, for sure.
Yeah, there's so many schemes now, aren't there, that you can get quick access to money if you want the new technology, you want this new handbag or whatever it is, you know, you can get it by getting some sort of quick access loan that it is incredible amounts of interest on top. So when this pandemic hits, that's it. People are done for, you know, and everybody looks to the government to bail them out. I think this is a big difference, you know. What's happened over there with the salaries? Because people are getting furloughed, aren't they? And just clear it up for people what that is.
Yeah. So over in the UK, it's people. I think 9 million people have been furloughed, which is where essentially you're still in employment. You're not made redundant, or you're not made to leave your job. So you're still employed, but you're not working, and the government then pay. The government then essentially pay your wages, and it's not as much as the money that you would have been on if you were still working, so it's not your full salary by any stretch. I think, I may be wrong on this off the top of my head, but I think the government pay up to, I think it was up to 2,500 or something, I could be wrong on that,
right,
per month, and then after that it's kind of, you know, that's all they'll pay up to. You know, and obviously that's costing the government a lot of money. I have no idea how much debt we must be in now, but I can't help but think that the amount of debt we must be in now, like, they'll just surely just be writing some of it off. Like, it's just going to be, you know, it's just going to absolutely ruin our economy. Not just the furloughing, like, you know, just the economic impacts of not having businesses open, and you know, paying for the government, paying for PPE equipment and all the rest of it, you know, building the Nightingale hospitals that have been going up around the UK. So in the UK, we've had a number of kind of pop-up temporary hospitals that have gone up that have been called the Nightingale hospitals, named after Florence Nightingale. And there's been one that's gone up near me in Birmingham, one in London. I think it's kind of major cities they've had them pop up. So in Birmingham, they took over the NEC arena, which is like a 20,000 capacity arena, and just filled it with thousands of hospital beds. Fortunately, that hasn't been used. There hasn't been kind of overwhelming of the NHS, which has meant that we've had to take up extra bed space. So it's kind of a blessing, really, that we haven't had to use it. But the fact that temporary hospitals like that have been going up, that, you know, that's not cheap. That's going to cost a lot of money. So I can't help but see how, I can't help but think that the economy is just going to be, it's going to be trying to catch up for years down the line. And I'm no economist, but if you just look at it face value, it's not ideal. Yeah,
you're right. Yeah, I think it's going to hurt a lot of people for years to come, and it could even cause some countries permanent damage. But I just want to say about the hospitals, I really commend that the UK were doing that, because, you know, they really went balls in, you know, building those places for overload of people going into beds and stuff. And that's similar to what they did here in China. You probably saw it on the TV, on the news, where they built that, you know, huge hospital in Wuhan to help with overload of patients, and they live streamed the whole thing. It's like, I don't know when this is gonna end. It's like we're living in, I've said it time and time again, but it's literally like we're living in a movie. Like, there's definitely going to be films made about this time.
Yeah, for sure.
it'll be
like,
really...
The year 2020 is going to be firmly in the history books. Not just because of coronavirus, which obviously is a huge part of this year, but, you know, the Black Lives Matter protests is obviously a huge part of this year. There's just been so many things going on this year that I've just been like, you can't write it. Like the other day when I was seeing news stories of, you know, they're making breakthroughs in the Madeleine McCann case. It's like, you can't. How's all of this happening in 1 year? It's mad.
It is. It really is. And just before we do move on to the other things, I just want to mention that we are incredibly lucky, actually, that, you know, of course, this is a terrible pandemic and a lot of people have been affected, businesses, people have lost loved ones and stuff. But in terms of looking at it from a bird's eye view, we have been incredibly lucky that this has been nowhere near as deadly as we originally thought it may be. You know, when this was coming out of China, I'm sure you were hearing, you know, every 1 in 10 infected dead, you know, things like that, you know, because there's no scientific research about this virus. And, you know, people were panicking, people were at home, friends, family were all going, get out of China, you know, it's unsafe there, you need to get back as soon as possible. And it's just mad to think about that time was just a few months ago, and we made the decision to stay here because we felt that getting on a plane was probably more, you know, it was riskier than just staying put. And that decision has massively changed the course of our lives. Like, it's particularly me, because I wouldn't have been able to come back. And I'm really glad I didn't come back, because seeing the way that it was dealt with on the ground here, just, I'll never forget it. It was like, it blew me away how quickly they were able to implement things nationwide. And, you know, it was amazing. It was really amazing, because it was like 1 or 2 days there was some new precaution as the figures were getting higher and higher. And at its climax, it was like they were really putting their foot on the gas trying to get rid of this thing. And it seems they were successful in doing so, even though now there's a potential second wave coming into place.
That's the thing, isn't it? It's this idea that we start to... So over here now, the UK government are starting to release the lockdown a little bit more. So shops opened on Monday here. We're now at a stage as well where people living on their own in like a single household, or if you're a single parent with children under the age of 18, you're allowed to now form like a social bubble with another household, which is fantastic. And, you know, it's starting to ease up a little bit over here now, but it's that risk, of course, that you ease it up a little bit and there's that risk of reinfection, and, you know, it kind of all starts over again. And particularly the fact as well that it's not a hard and fast rule that we'll necessarily find a vaccine, you know, like...
Yeah, exactly.
What's saying that we're obviously still in the early days of research with the coronavirus and more needs to be found out about it, but what's to say that it doesn't... It's like a seasonal thing where it comes back and it mutates and the strain is different and it reinfects people again, even if they've already had a jab or a vaccine to help them out. In which case, you know, it's then going to be a case of, we're actually going to have to... We have to learn how to deal with this thing, as opposed to learning, you know, as opposed to just eradicating it. And that would be a totally different... I mean, that's a totally different outcome to if we just had a cure and got rid of it. So, I mean, if we have to live with this thing, then that could have, I don't want to say permanent, but it could certainly have very long-term changes to our lives as we know it, for sure.
Absolutely. And just onto your point about them releasing lockdown and giving you, I don't know exactly what the guidelines are over there, but I know they're saying, you, like you just said, you can meet with another household, or you know, this many people can group together in a park or whatever it is. I'm so skeptical about that. I feel like it's all guesswork. What's the science behind saying, oh look, a few people can get together but not more than 6 or 8 or whatever? Like, how does that make any sense? Or are they just trying to like put people's mind at ease to make them think like the government know what they're talking about? Do you know what I mean? Like, how does it make any difference if it's 10 people together or 25 people together. You know, if one person's got it, it's going to spread it to everybody. So what's the science behind this? And you know, especially when they say like, oh, restaurants can open at half capacity. It's like, does that make any difference when the person 4 feet away from you has got no mask on and they're doing all of this into, you know, and they've even shown that this stuff coming out your mouth can spread up to like 10 meters. So I feel like it's all just guesswork, and it's like
there's a definite grey area at the minute, because another thing, like you can't really go into someone's house, but you can't go into someone's house to say sit at their dinner table and chat to them, but you are allowed to go into someone's house to pass through if you just go into the toilet. And it's like, you know, so many people are just not going to do that. Like it, and you can understand why in a sense, because it's such a grey area. People will interpret it in a way that suits them.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's difficult as well, because, you know, you've got people that haven't seen elderly relatives and, you know, elderly parents, and they may not necessarily know when the last time will be that they do see them, because, you know, they're elderly. And it's so difficult because people are really wanting to see other people now, and we can, fortunately, but for so long people haven't been able to. So it's just it poses so many different kind of like moral dilemmas, and yeah, it's mad.
Sorry to interrupt there. Hold that thought. I've just got to make sure my Audacity is still recording because my screen went off. Go on.
So what's the deal in China now? Is it totally back to normal, would you say, or as normal as it can be?
Well, depending on when this video goes live, I'll try and put it live within the next sort of week. But just to let everyone know, we're recording this on 18th of June. My life has been totally back to how I lived my life for the past like 4 to 5 weeks, and it's kind of like first in first out kind of deal, I guess. And I feel really blessed that that's the case. And just recently, you know, schools and stuff have started to go back, but you know, as you said before, it only takes a couple for this to spread again, wildfire, and that's what we're seeing in Beijing now. So we'll have to see how that goes down, and I'm just hoping it doesn't affect travel plans coming up in the next sort of 6 weeks. I think I'm taking like 6 flights in the next 6 weeks. So you know,
where are you off to?
So we are going to this. I don't know. You may have already seen this on our channel because this is probably going to go up after. But we will have been to. We're flying to Shanghai on Monday because Huawei have invited us to be press at their press opening day for their biggest flagship store in the world.
Amazing.
Which
that's so cool.
I really can't wait for that. That's going to be a really cool experience. And we're going to do a live stream on the next day, which is the public opening day. We're going to do like a mobile live stream and kind of try and interview a couple of people on the street or something like that. Shortly after that, we're flying to Chongqing, which is a central city, which is it's technically, and it's also technically not the most populated city in the world, because it has Chongqing as a city, but it's kind of morphed with the cities around it. So it's all kind of one big city, and it homes like 30 to 35 million people.
Whoa.
It is just incredibly
so pretty much half
huge.
the population of the UK.
Mad, isn't
man,
it?
I really need to come out and visit you in China, because I just there's so many things like that I just want to see for myself. Like just the sheer size of it alone, it's like it's crazy. It
really would blow your mind. You know, it's really hard to even get into our own heads how big these cities are. But trying to explain to someone is, you just can't do it. And I'll get back to your point in a second. But I remember, I'll never forget when my dad, you know, flew me out here. He just said, "Oh, I live in Shenzhen." So I was like, "Cool." I looked a bit up about the city, not much, but I thought, "Wow, it looks like a big city. It looks cool." So I arrived, and we're in the taxi and we're going for quite a while. I'm like, where do you live? And I looked on the map and it's like, all the way out of Shenzhen center, and it's like quite far out. And I looked on the map, it's like 40 minutes from the center, a drive. And I thought, oh no, what have I got myself into? I thought I was going to be living like in the city life and all this. And I thought I was literally had like rural images in my head. 45 minutes out the center, and it's like just as, if not more, built up than the center of London. It's like, it's just enormous, man, enormous. And to get to like the other side of the city, you can be on the metro for 2 hours, 2.5 hours. But yeah, you need to come out here at some point and see it for yourself, because this city is quite different because it's a brand new city. It's only existed for about 25 years. Before then, it was a little fishing village of about 10,000 people.
It's still a big city though, isn't it? It's still like, isn't it like the 4th or 5th biggest city?
Yeah. It homes about 13 million now, and
wow.
In comparison to London,
that's pretty much the size of London, isn't it? London's like 12.
London
million,
has about 8 million since the last.
Oh, is it 8 million? Okay.
Yeah, but huge, and just the infrastructure and everything, it's just on another level. When I first came here for the first sort of 3 months, every night I'd walk out and just look around and just think, wow, it doesn't feel real. And I often think about, I'm going down a rabbit hole here now, but I don't mind. I often think about the kids that grow up here. And how when we grow up and we had we have the internet from whenever we can remember and stuff, and we get told from our dad, oh, you don't remember life when we had to, we didn't have mobile phones and things like that. There's kids growing up here in the center of these tier 1 cities, Shenzhen, Shanghai, and this is their world. Like seeing these 40 floor skyscrapers all around them, the craziest innovative technology. This is their base standard. You can't. They're like leading innovators in the world in these cities right now. Like you can't go anywhere in the world and get better technology or see much more than you can see in the center of cities here. So for those kids, it must be such a strange thing to grow up and go elsewhere in the world and think, oh wow, I didn't realize everywhere's not like this.
If they were to come to the UK, would they get in the UK and be like, everything's so backwards here, everything's almost like taking a step back?
Hey, what's interesting is a lot of people here think that the UK, America are these super advanced places where everyone's super educated, everyone's got great jobs, there's not much crime, and they think it's this utopia, a lot of people. And I'm
really?
like, that's not the case. Obviously we live in a good country. I'm proud of where I'm from and I think it's a great place, but at the same time, it's not what a lot of people here think it's like. And similarly to how a lot of people back there don't know what China's like.
Yeah, so what would you say some of the biggest misconceptions of China from a Western perspective? What do you find? Does anyone ever say anything like, "Oh, China's like this," and it's just totally inaccurate?
That's a very good question. Very good question, and we try and do a lot. We try and do a lot to answer that kind of question on the channel. I'd say probably the biggest one of all is people just hammering it home, thinking that China is this really oppressed communist country where the government are spying on you 24/7 and there's surveillance everywhere, so the government know exactly what you're doing and all of this. And I was one of those people when I came here, because you're just a product of what the media shows you, really, aren't you? Especially when we're young. And I came here and saw what it's actually like, and see that in terms of what people are like, forgetting about the government and stuff like that, people want to do exactly the same things here, and they're allowed to. Yeah, they can't publicly criticize the government. But besides from that, they can do anything they want to do, and they're not going to run into much trouble. I go to bars, I'll eat at nice restaurants. In a lot of ways, you've got a lot more freedom here than I did in England. And one example of that is the cameras. There is a lot of cameras here. Just a quick fact for you, there's actually more cameras per capita in London than there are in any city in China, which is probably different to what you would think. Know that. Anyway, there's a lot of cameras here, and in the West, that's seen as like, the government are spying on you. But in reality, I can walk around at 2 a.m. by myself and look at my phone and not have a worry in the world. And that is something you just can't do in cities over there. Another one, all transport is super accessible, super cheap over here because it's backed by the government. The government sort of control the pricing of it. So you can get anywhere in the city for super affordable. And these are freedoms that you don't typically have over there, but it gets hammered home that you can't publicly criticize the government. What do you think? Because that was the point I was going to mention, actually. The fact that you can't publicly talk negatively about the government. That's quite a big deal, though, isn't it? Because, with freedom of speech and everything, surely people could stand out in public and praise the government, but then also surely do you think people should be allowed to speak negatively about the government? You know what? We grow up in England. Again, it goes back to this individualist thing. You have your own views on how the country should be run, and you kind of assign yourself to a team. You're either Labour or you're Conservative or whatever else, but you assign yourself to a team. Over here, they don't really even think about it. It's more like you just get on with your own life. If they see that their life is improving, I see that they kind of put up with the little things that they might not be so happy with, because their standard of living is improving so drastically over the past sort of 30 years since Mao's era, or longer than that, since Mao's era, 70 years or whatever it is, that it kind of gets put to the back of their mind. And you should, when I speak to people and they say how their mums and dads' lives were when they were like younger and how difficult their lives were, you can see from their perspective, if you stand in their shoes, you can see that they have nothing to complain about. Like, their lives are so much better than when they were younger, when their parents were younger, that they see that the government is doing a good job, if that makes sense. So they put their trust in the government, and they feel, most people feel that I speak to, feel that the government do what's best in the people's best interest.
I'm kind of torn on this one, because it's really interesting you say that from the perspective of locals that live in China, from the citizens, because I look at that and I think, okay, well, you're right. It's easy from an outside perspective to sit there and say, it's bad that people can't, kind of exercise their freedom of speech, if you want to say that, and talk negatively, in public about the government. But then another part of me thinks, well, yeah, okay, fantastic that the government has improved their quality of life, but does that necessarily mean that people can't talk about the negatives? Because no one government is perfect. I'm kind of torn on that one, really, because you're completely right. People's lives have improved over time, and that's fantastic. And obviously people should be appreciative of that and be thankful that the government has done that. But then also there may still well be imperfections in how the country's being governed, and surely people should still be able to be like, no, this is wrong, can we change this?
Yeah, there is a there's a system where you can put something forward online if you go through the correct I shouldn't talk too much about this. I don't know exactly what it is, but I know there's some sort of system online where you can contact somebody who's you're allowed to contact about some issue that you might have. However, you can't go on social media and start saying, oh, you know, this and that about the government. You know what? I think, of course, I can agree with you in a sense. However, it almost seems that it might be better for a country with this sort of population to not have a democratic system, because, you know, they have a similar population in India, and, you know, India in the same amount of time have done nowhere near what China have been able to do. And I think the main reason for that is because they're in a government who can't get voted out. They can plan 20 years ahead, and they can start thinking of, you know, putting forth plans 20 years in advance. You know, they've laid 30,000 kilometers of high-speed track in the same time that in England we've been talking about maybe building one for the same amount of time, like 10 or 15 years.
Yeah.
So because in England and in Western countries we have a democracy, they, you know, one party wants to do something and the next, you know, they have a 4-year run and the next party gets in power and they don't want to do it and they will have other values to think, you know, the country can't really move forward. So that's something to think about as well. And, you know, another interesting point actually is if they did have a democracy here, they've got people, because China's so big, they've got people all over the country who have different values. They have completely different cultures. They have different faiths. There was no way they would be able to choose a party that fit the majority of the population, if that makes sense. Because people all over having different views. However, sorry to blab on, but
keep going, mate. Keep going.
I do agree that the worry is if the wrong people get into power and start massively abusing that power that they have. That's the main concern, isn't it?
I mean, if you're in the government in China, you're in charge of a lot of people. That's a big population, and yeah, China's got a lot of power. You know, on the global stage, China's a huge superpower. Arguably the biggest superpower. Well, it probably is the biggest superpower, depending on which way you'd measure that. But you know, that it is a big deal who's in power. I completely agree. Same with America. It's a big deal over there who's put in power, because America's got such a large influence in global politics.
Massively, yeah, massively. And you know, you probably already know, my dad is totally invested in this, like, world politics, world economy, business. And, you know, obviously I don't take everything he says as truth. I have my own opinions and views on it, but
of course
he does highlight a lot of things to me that I think, well, you know, that's you know, an interesting way of looking at it, and the average person probably doesn't know that that's the case. You know, there's a lot of things that America do, and they will chastise China for doing it, but they're actually doing it too. It's just that the average person doesn't know about it, if that makes sense.
What did you, and this is kind of bringing it back to coronavirus a little bit, so we're kind of going a bit full circle here, but what did you think about when you saw Donald Trump in the news calling it the Chinese virus, and he also called it Kung Flu? Like, what did you think when you saw that? And how's the reception been? I'm not sure if people in China have been made aware of this news, but what was the general reception like?
Yeah, so I'll pick the second part you said first. I think most people who I know obviously speak decent English, because I don't know enough Mandarin yet to speak to people who don't know English. So they are kind of slightly more open to the Western world than, you know, the average citizen. And most of them are very aware that the Western media is extremely negative towards them, even putting a negative light on things that are extremely positive. And they are a very patriotic society, and that gives them this like us versus them mentality. You know, the world's against us. We need to, you know, be stronger and be together. I feel like it's very much of that sort of society. The first thing he said about Trump calling it the China virus, I think it's just another one of his attempts to stir up the population to be anti-China, to try and keep them. What's the right way of putting it? To keep the local population against China, because they see them as a rising superpower, and they now feel a threat, you know, to be in the, because America have always been on top, haven't they, in terms of the economy? So they now see them as a threat. Go on.
I was just going to say, I was very surprised that I saw a world leader using a time like the coronavirus, you know, a time of national emergency, national tragedy as well. You know, hundreds of thousands of people have lost their lives around the world. Using a time like this to be pointing the finger of blame when we're still in the thick of it. Like, if you want to go down that route of, you know, they caused it, or if you want to go down that route, if at all, don't go down that route in the middle of the pandemic. You know,
right?
There should surely be a time after this is all blown over and we've contained it or we've eradicated the disease. Then there's a point, if you want to make that case, to then put forward a formal inquiry as to how it came about. But to just be pointing the finger of blame at China, I think, like, you know, midway through this coronavirus, I mean, it was a while ago that he said it now, but I just thought it was just a really lousy time to be doing something like that, and almost trying to draw attention away from the actual issue at hand.
Oh, that's exactly what it is. He's trying to deflect the attention from how badly they've dealt with it. That's exactly, you've hit the nail on the head. Because, you know, there's a YouTuber that we're in touch with here that did a fantastic video on comparing how South Korea and North America dealt, and how the USA dealt with the coronavirus. And you think I said South Korea, right? You say
I think you did, yeah.
I meant South Korea. Anyway, you think South Korea and America, how are they too much alike? They are incredibly alike, and he lays it out in the video how you can compare those two countries, you know, hugely. And you know, it just goes to show, it's about an hour and a half. He goes really into depth. It's all about the facts of how poorly the US, the Trump's administration, dealt with the pandemic. So I believe that he's just using this China thing as an act to deflect the attention on how badly they've dealt with it. And like you said, to do it in the thick of the actual virus, just that's what says it. That's what puts the cherry on top for me, because I don't think he actually cares that much about the people. He just cares about getting re-elected in November, and he's trying to...
I hate to agree with you on that.
Yeah. It's a shame, you know. A world leader and the stuff he comes out with, it's like, it just blows my mind. Again, it just comes back to this living in a movie. It's like, what is going on? Did you see
moving away from, sorry to slightly change the subject, moving away from America over to the UK, as an outsider, how do you think the UK has dealt with the coronavirus pandemic? Do you think we've done a good job? Do you think we've done a bad job?
I'd say it's disappointing to say the least, because that's because I'm comparing it to how China dealt with it, and I saw how proactive they were. And the difference is, you know, it broke out here, so it was here first, and they still managed to get it under control, you know, way quicker than a lot of these other countries that had 2 months notice. It seems like most other countries around the world were giving it this like, oh, it's a China problem, it's not really going to affect us. And the thing that really I thought was disheartening was when I saw the Cheltenham races go ahead. That was when we were in the thick of it here. Sorry, for everyone watching, the Cheltenham races is a big horse racing meet in England, and people come from all over the UK to this event, and there's about 250,000 people that go over the 4 or 5 days that it's on.
A lot of people. I've been a few times, and it's a lot of people that go.
And that went ahead maybe a month after it broke out in China. So flights were going back to the UK, and it would have been in the UK, just not yet traced and found. And that still went ahead, and that probably was a big factor in how much this spread around the UK, I think.
Yeah, I mean, it's so difficult because there's so many factors that go into, obviously, it spreading, and both in terms of how prepared we are and people's individual decisions. But you're right, I can't see how 250,000 odd people gathering over the space of 4 or 5 days was ever gonna help. Unfortunately, I think that's a case of money talks, doesn't it? And I think they would have lost a lot of money if the Cheltenham Festival didn't go ahead.
Sure.
Yeah, and it's almost like it's almost tragic, because I almost feel like if that festival was a week or two later, it wouldn't have gone ahead. It almost fell at that kind of that for them, that
pivoting
the perfect
point.
Time where they could get away with it, but it doesn't mean it was the right thing, obviously.
Yeah, and also the government is a big part to do with it, because if the government aren't saying cancel it, then the people who are in charge of putting that letting that carry on and cancelling it, if they cancelled it, they would be in deep shit. So it's not a easy decision to make. I just want to move this.
So in short, you're saying disappointing from the UK government.
Sorry, yeah. Back to the original question.
In a nutshell, that's what you're saying.
I'd say disappointing, yeah, and
yeah.
disappointing.
I agree.
Yeah.
And obviously, it comes to a point where, to an extent, you can't do right for doing wrong. You make one decision, it upsets some people.
Exactly.
You make another decision, it upsets other. And I'm also sensitive to the fact that the world hasn't been through this kind of pandemic before. Coronavirus or COVID-19 is a new disease. It's a new thing, and there is an element of, we kind of have to learn as we go. I get that, but when we've got the World Health Organization giving us advice, and when we've seen other countries who have had it before us, how they're reacting, I can't help but feel as though there's less excuse then for us to make better decisions.
Yeah, I think so. All I can hope is that moving forward, countries have better systems in place to deal with these things in the future. Because back to what I said, we got kind of lucky that this is nowhere near as deadly as we first thought, and it's kind of a wake up call to see how this can be a real disaster. Worse than any other natural disaster. This besides like the Yellowstone volcano blowing up or whatever, but this is what pandemic.
Mate, the way 2020 is going, nothing would surprise me now.
Exactly.
I saw a news article the other day. It was like 12 minor tremors outside Yellowstone. I was like, oh god, that's next. That's next.
Yeah, we can move on a little bit to the madness that's going on around the world in terms of the Black Lives Matter protests. That happened. It was the perfect storm. You couldn't, the movie's written already. It's just the reality's storyline. It's crazy. People are locked up in their homes, worried about how they're going to pay their rent, bored out of their mind. People are anxious, frustrated, and then you have that cop that leans on that guy's neck for 8 minutes and 46 seconds and kills him. And then, you know, it just erupts, you know, and first in Minneapolis in America and now just around the world. And it's nice and not nice to see, because it's nice to see that people are out peacefully protesting, but of course the bad actors, the bad apples, you know, get out on the media, and you know, the rioters who are using this, taking advantage of the situation, who probably don't even care about this Black Lives Matter protest. They're just using it as a reason to go and get free Nikes. You know, they're the ones that are making this look, you know, making the whole situation much messier.
Yeah, I agree. And I obviously am fully on board and fully support people that are protesting. I think it's fantastic that people are doing that. But when you see people looting stores, you just can't help but feel actually you're getting away from the issue at hand now. And yeah, it's just mad to me that me and you were even sat here in the year 2020 having this conversation about
I know.
about what's been going on. Like, how is the topic of racial inequality still remotely a thing in the year 2020? I mean, it should never have been a thing anyway. But the past is the past. What happened was awful, but surely you'd think now we've learned from that. But still, there is systematic racism going on. It's just like, it's mad that, you know, people are having to protest for something as simple as being viewed as equal or being treated equal. It's mad that that's a thing.
It is. It really is. And, you know, I'm sure you've kind of felt this way, and I definitely feel like this way now, addressing it publicly to a large audience. I feel like an imposter talking about, you know, racism in the sense that we are white males, and we've not had to deal with these kinds of issues that people, you know, of black ethnicity have to deal with on a daily basis, and it makes the average person feel very uncomfortable talking about it, because we are extremely privileged that we don't even realize that there's lots of things that we don't have to put up with, if that makes sense.
Mate, I almost feel guilty is the wrong word, but I almost feel uncomfortable talking about it now, because I almost don't feel as though I'm in any position to be talking about it. But that is the crux of the issue.
Exactly,
it's the case now. You're seeing what's going on. We have to be anti-racist, and being silent, you know, that you've seen the phrase silence is compliance, which is totally true. Like, if I feel like if we weren't to sit here and say anything, that's kind of feeding into the issue. That's feeding into the issue at hand. But yeah.
You know, if I was back there, this is the thing, 'cause, you know, you see everybody doing this all over social media. You know, the putting up the black picture on Instagram and things like that. And I did that, right? And I'm not going to lie, 50% of me was wondering whether I should do that, because I know there's so many people that are just doing that because they feel like that's the thing they should do because everyone else is doing it. And if I was back there, I'd just love to see with my own eyes the support going on for these protests, and you know, because out here it's like I'm totally removed from it. You know, there's obviously no protest going on in the streets over here, and you know, I'm just seeing all these clips online. It's really interesting that, you know, I've grown up in the UK, and all of this stuff is happening for the first time whilst I'm in China. So I've not got these experiences from the same angle as you at all, you know. It's totally strange.
Yeah, and there's been so many protests going on over here. I mean, just the other day there was one in Worcester. Was it Worcester or Bristol? I think there was one in Worcester near to me, in Bristol, and obviously you've seen the footage of in Bristol the statue was pulled down and thrown into the thrown to the river. I forget the name of the statue now, which is really bad.
But it was a guy who was like a pioneer of the slave trade, right?
He was a slave. Yeah, he was a prominent slave trader, and you've now got people wanting to take all statues down that kind of represent British imperialism, and I really feel like for the first time, and there's been various protests throughout our lives, and the Black Lives Matter protest it's not a new thing. It's been going on for a long time. It's not the first time we've seen Black Lives Matter protests.
No.
But I really feel like this time it's different. I really feel like this time it's going to affect a change, and that there may be, and I don't want to speak too soon, obviously, because a lot needs to happen, but I really feel like for the first time we may see a change moving forward. There definitely seems, something feels different about this particular civil rights kind of movement in comparison to the past. And I can't quite put my finger on what that is, but it does feel different this time. And I hope that when it stops trending on social media and when something else is trending, it's still an issue that's at the forefront of people's minds, because it needs to be a constant active effort, doesn't it, to kind of...
It does, yeah.
To change this. It needs to be a permanent change moving forward, not just for a few weeks singing and dancing about it and then not. And I've definitely, looked at myself and thought, right, I'm going to continually educate myself on it and continually keep my eye out on petitions to sign, because it has to be something moving forward.
Man, I just can't help but think, well, what things are going to be like in like a year, 2 years time. How much change there's going to be in terms of coronavirus and these protests that are going on, and if Trump gets back into power and keeps stirring up this madness around the world, and
mate, God knows, who knows, man. Who knows? And
I think,
it's mad.
One potential reason, this shouldn't be a reason why this civil rights movement is slightly different you think it's slightly different to the past, but I can't help but think it's slightly different because of the pandemic, and the average person is just, in their own home, super frustrated. Who's to your side? Is
Sorry,
it Jake?
mate. My dad.
How's your
My
dad?
dad's outside the window giving me all sorts of gestures. So off-putting. Sorry, mate. Carry on. He's gone now. I'm having words
I can
after.
just imagine him. That's
Steve,
so
honestly.
Well, I can't.
As
help
you were
but
saying,
think,
mate.
That's all right. I can't help but think this one has been slightly different, just because of the fact that everyone's already riled up from everything that's going on at the moment. So this has just been the catalyst for, what's it called? A gunpowder keg just blowing up. And, mate.
Yeah, man. It's mad. I feel like that concludes nicely, to be fair.
I think it does. I agree.
Yeah,
it's a nice note to end on. It's been a 10 out of 10 conversation. I've really enjoyed it, and I've just clicked my phone and it's in 95 minutes. I don't know where that time's gone.
No, has it been that long?
And that's the time since we've been on this call
long.
Anyway.
I'll tell you what, me and you are awful when we get going, aren't we? We just keep going and going.
We do keep nattering. Anyway, Ben, you've got a podcast. Tell us all about your podcast. I want people to go over it. If they're interested, I'd love people to go over and check it out.
It's a shameless plug now. So it's got the genius title. It's called The Ben Coley Podcast. And I love new music and discovering new bands, new artists that are unsigned and under the radar. And it is all about that. So I pick 3 unsigned, undiscovered, under the radar artists each week, play snippets of their songs. The artist will talk about the song. I'll review the song. And then I also play my kind of song of the week from a major artist, and then and I talk about my favourite album of the week from a major artist. So it's a really good kind of pit stop for new music. So if you're into discovering new music and you just want some different genres and some different songs to sink your teeth into, then it's good for that. And it's only a small podcast, and it's just like a passion project, really, because I just love talking about new music, and I've wanted to do a podcast for ages, and it just was it made the most sense for me to do, really.
Sorry to drop you in that, and you say it's a shameless plug. I mean, I think we've really done. I think this is really a step. We're moving the needle in the right direction. I feel proud of you, proud of us for doing this. And it feels good to speak our mind and get it out there to more people. And hopefully, even if one person can, pick up a book to educate themselves a little bit about the situation, and that I'd feel like that's a success. So.
Definitely, man. And mate, thank you so much for having me on. And so you're doing ridiculously well. So you started off the year at 0 subs. It's probably gone up since I last saw it. It was around 113k when I last saw it. You and Lee, you're absolutely smashed it. It's so good to see, man. It's really, really cool.
I mean, yeah, you say start off the year. It's 14th of June last year, so just tipping over that
cool.
year, March, 12 months, and yeah, we're on 115,000 now, and I don't know how it's happening, and it's weird. It's a weird thing, because I said to Dad, like, it's a number on a screen, right? And it doesn't feel that much different as to when you're getting 1,000 views a video and you're getting 100,000 views a video, because it's just a number on a screen. Obviously, the revenue's going up with that, and that's obviously helping out massively. We're reinvesting a lot back in to buy more equipment and stuff. But in terms of you just can't get your head around that many people watching one of your videos. But if that was in a stadium, if all those people were in a football stadium, obviously you'd notice a tangible difference. But we're just going to keep creating. It seems like people are enjoying it, and it's
absolutely,
opening up.
mate. I'm loving the content for sure. It's cool flicking between you and your dad as well. Like, your dad will put out a video, you'll put out a video, and it's just really cool to see the difference.
I never knew. If you'd have said to me 18 months ago, you're going to be doing a YouTube channel with your dad, and it's going to be going pretty well, I would have been like, no chance.
During the global pandemic.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's like, mate, living in the moment, man. Living in the moment, but loving it.
Exactly,
but
mate.
Massively appreciate you coming on.
No worries at all, man. No, I appreciate it. Thanks for having me on, mate.
It's 1 p.m. over there, so I'm sure you're going to get some lunch now or something like that. But
yeah, man, I'm going to go. I need to shoot now anyway. I've got to crack on with a few things. But what time's it for you over there now?
It's 8.
Time
it's weird,
difference.
isn't it?
See that,
time difference,
mate?
thing.
We could go down that rabbit hole. It's weird. We'll stop there. Yeah.
We will. I'm sure we could go on for hours. Anyway, hopefully you watching did enjoy. Ben's podcast will be down in the description. Please go and check it out if you do enjoy looking for new music and whatnot. I'm sure this will stir up some conversation in the comments, so it'd be great to engage in some conversation down there. Social links will all be down below as well, and a warm goodbye from the both of us. Any last words, Ben?
How do you normally sign off your videos, mate? Should I sign it off in like a formal way?
Until next time,
let's just go for it.
Take care. See you later, everyone.
That's so
Bye-bye.
YouTube.